Joining us now here on his usual Friday spot on the Rich Eisen Show, my colleague from the NFL Network, NFL Media Group, getting ready for the Insiders on NFL Plus and the network, Tom Pelissero. How are you, Tom?
Doing great, Rich. Hard to believe we're already into week 4 here. Like, if this were the old 16-game schedule, we'd be talking about the quarter pole. There's no easy way to divide 17 games. The calendar starts to flip to October, and, the stakes get raised in terms of teams, figuring out, are we in? Are we out? And if we're out, what exactly does that mean for the rest of 2020?
Yeah, I mean, when you said 17 divided by 4, again, that makes it seem like one of my fifth graders' math problems that she seems to solve and looks at me for help. And I'm like, yeah, I got nothing for you. So let's just jump into, what did you make of Thursday night football, Tom? What'd you make of that?
The Lions were absolutely as impressive as I think that they would have hoped that they looked on that stage. And listen, the Packers got some reinforcements, Aaron Jones, Christian Watson. Neither of those guys had really practiced until Wednesday at full speed. So they were both just coming back, but they're beat up on the offensive line. There's no excuses whatsoever. But when you hear Matt LaFleur talking after the game about, we got manhandled on both sides of the ball, we got our asses kicked, that's indicative of exactly what I think we all saw watching that game. They've done a phenomenal job in Detroit, building a team that is really physical. They've got their share of injuries as well. They've been beat up along the offensive line here. David Montgomery, that signing, I mean, the backstory on that, Rich, is so fascinating because the Lions were trying to re-sign Jamal Williams. They actually offered Jamal Williams more money than he ended up getting in New Orleans. Williams wasn't willing to take it. They pivoted, gave a little bit more to get David Montgomery from their division rivals. And as much as we saw flashes from David Montgomery in Chicago over the previous 4 years, the guy you're watching right now looks like a difference maker on offense. And they got a whole bunch of other big physical athletes that they're going to try to beat you up with.
Well, speaking of runners available, Tom, it's now time, right? So the PUP list 4-week stint for Jonathan Taylor ends, I imagine, as soon as the Colts wrap up their Week 4 contest that's being slated to be played at home against the Rams. What is the status? What's going on? Are there any trade talks behind the scenes? What's the scoop?
Well, let's start with health on this one, Rich. It does sound like Jonathan Taylor's made a lot of progress. He was pretty close at the start of the season. There were obviously a lot of factors involved, but he was still kind of coming around with the ankle. He's in that building, from what I've been told, every day. He's going through his rehab. The Colts are able to watch him. They see a guy who continues to get better and better. And the Colts are still hoping that they can figure out a way for Jonathan Taylor to be back with that team. There have been trade talks. That's been documented. But, if we're talking about Miami, they got Davante Adams running for 280 yards and 4 touchdowns last week. And they got Raheem Mostert fully healthy right now. The prospect of giving a top-of-the-market contract to Jonathan Taylor right now may not be as alluring as it might have been if it was at all prior to the start of the season. Obviously, Green Bay had checked in. There was not, I know our colleague Ian Rappaport reported that they offered a couple of mid-round picks for Jonathan Taylor. It wasn't really a serious type of an offer in terms of something the Colts would be willing to take. There's other teams that are hard up at that position. The Ravens right now are really beat up at the running back spot. We'll see what other injuries might arise here in the coming days. But barring a trade, let's see. Can the Colts figure out some way, maybe with a adjusted contract, to get Jonathan Taylor back into the fold? And if you're Taylor at this point, do you want to go someplace else, or do you want to go, give it your best here, try to finish out this season, show that you're healthy, show that you're still that guy who led the league in rushing in 2021, and then hope that you get a chance to hit an improved market come next March?
So I know you said that the Packers offer wasn't deemed to be serious. You want to talk about unserious? Asking for Jalen Waddle might be in that category. Did that really happen, Tom? Best on your reporting?
Yeah. I mean, if you're the Colts and you've got a premium player like a Jonathan Taylor, you don't want to trade him. Right. So, all right, great. You want him? Give us a premium player in return.
It sounds it sounds like my 12-year-old's fantasy league. I see some of the offers from his fellow 12-year-olds, and it's just like, we will offer you somebody who is somewhat hurt and doesn't play for your best player. That's what we're doing. And really? So that's I guess my way of setting up crystal ball it. I know you're in the business of facts and information, but using that as a background way to tell us, what do you think is going to happen? Is Taylor somewhat interested, seeing what this team is doing. I mean, the Colts are in first right now, and Anthony Richardson is coming back. Is there a way that he's seeing like, all right, I'll do it here and then figure out the rest? Or is he just say, screw it, I want out of here? What's your crystal ball for me?
It sounds like Jonathan Taylor's been in a better mood since he's been back just around the building here. But there's a difference between that and, oh, yeah, I'm going to come back and play for whatever his number is, $3 million or so this season. So, I think that this is going to heat up certainly come Monday, Tuesday, coming out of the week 4 games. Colts will be back on the practice field, presumably on Wednesday of next week. And at that point, you would hope that you've got a resolution in some regard here. Again, there could be new things that arise with regard to injuries, and that could spur trade talks. My understanding has been there's really been nothing close to this point of what the Colts would want, which is upwards of what the 49ers gave up to the Panthers for Christian McCaffrey. It equates to roughly a first-round pick. That was, if you add everything up, depending on the value charts you use, Rich, it was like equivalent of like a high second-round pick is more or less what the Panthers got out of it. The Colts want more than that for Jonathan Taylor. Nobody's been close. Doesn't mean that something won't arise here. You also got the contractual piece of this. But as of right now, again, there's nothing imminent on a trade, which leads you to go, okay, is there a way for the Colts to get Jonathan Taylor back into the fold to make sense also for Jonathan Taylor, who's a really good player, by all accounts, a really good guy. I've dealt with him. He's a really smart guy too. What does he see in this situation? We'll get a firm answer on that, you would hope, early next week.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's talk about what is going on in the Jets locker room based on your reporting. You're hearing throughout the week. Joe Namath went on local radio and a Michael Kay show, as we all know, and said Zach Wilson should be out of there. He's sick and tired of seeing him play. And now, Zach Wilson showed up to his press conference wearing an I Got Your Back T-shirt. They're putting up T-shirts to say that they have his back. So what is the latest of what's going on there, best you can tell, Tom?
I would start by saying this, Rich. Unless Joe Namath wants to come back and play quarterback for the Jets and get a time machine back to 50 years ago, I'm not sure that there's a lot out there in terms of what the Jets could go get. It's easy for Namath to say, I'm done with him. I want to see him move on. But then you heard Robert Saleh saying, yeah, well, he's entitled to that opinion. It's a very kind way of saying, what do you want us to do? You could look around and you could say, okay, we can go trade for a Case Keenum. We could sign a Joe Flacco or a Carson Wentz. Are any of these things, the ceiling certainly isn't as high as it is on Zach Wilson. The floor might not even be as high. If you go back and you watch the tape of Wentz last year or Matt Ryan last year or Flacco when he's played recently here, the Jets are certainly exploring everything, and they've talked about a lot of different things. At this point, there's really not an easy way to get an upgrade. Now, there's a lot of talk about Kirk Cousins and what potentially could happen. I can tell you the Vikings are not there right now. Yes, they're 0-3, but their focus is go beat Carolina, get that first win, and try to get this thing rolling with a remodeled and pretty young roster that's got some superstar power with guys like Justin Jefferson on it. They're not punting on the season at this point. Maybe by late October, we're having a different conversation, but they're not there now. And even if we were, the Jets are in a spot where they give up a lot of draft capital for Aaron Rodgers, and they are paying Aaron Rodgers a lot of money this year and next year at a time that, based on Rodgers' own statements and everything the Jets have said, they're anticipating that he's going to be back. So you're in a difficult spot. Yes, there were some blowups. There's natural frustration. I think it's clear that, whether it's Michael Carter, Garrett Wilson, whoever, everybody knows that Zach Wilson's got to play better, but so does everybody around him. And that, Rich, I remember our first conversation on this after the Aaron Rodgers injury. It could not be about Zach Wilson. It could not be Zach Wilson, go be great. It was Zach Wilson, be good enough, and everybody be great around him. The other thing you got to remember is Nathaniel Hackett, based on his relationship with Aaron Rodgers, knowing what Aaron can do, knowing how Aaron likes to manipulate things at the line of scrimmage, get in and out of plays, throw the backside options on run plays, everything else. They built an offense in which Rodgers had the keys to everything. Zach Wilson, he's a hard worker. I'm sure he can pick those things up, but they don't want him to have the keys. So now you're figuring out how do we walk that back, kind of build the scheme around what we think Zach Wilson can do well. They got a ton of weaponry between Breece Hall. They got to find a way to get Dalvin Cook going. They got Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard. And Randall Cobb's made some plays for him. You got pieces around him. You have to protect him better. The offensive line's been a huge issue here. And the defense has to keep doing what it's doing. If not, yeah, you're probably going to be a 6-win team, and this entire season is going to be a mess.
Mm.
And you're going to hope Aaron Rodgers comes back in 2024 and gets you out of there. But this doesn't have to be Zach Wilson suddenly captures everything that made him the number 2 overall pick. Forget the draft position. Forget everything that you thought about Zach Wilson. It's just be good enough, which is all you're really asking from a backup quarterback in most cases.
So then what is your reporting on the Rodgers piece, Tom? You touched on something interesting. We've talked about it over the last couple of shows as well, is the fact that he's still in the fold for next year, and that's the plan for next year. And the offensive coordinator, who definitely needs to be more creative for a guy that you might not think can handle the creative aspect of things, but that is Nathaniel Hackett's number one job right now, is to figure out how to get Zach Wilson playing better and to be more creative in that process, so the team that knows they're trying to run the ball can either have it run down their throat or have it thrown over the run defense. That's my long-winded way of setting it all up to say Hackett's Rodgers' guy. So how much is Rodgers looming over the thought process of what the Jets need to do win right now, knowing that you still have to cater to his wishes in a way? Your thoughts on that?
Well, right now you're in survival mode, Rich. If you're the Jets, you're just trying to figure out a way that, hey, we just got to pack this thing together and do the best that we can. Yeah, big picture, it is different because you've got guaranteed money committed to Aaron Rodgers. You made that trade. You gave up a second-round pick and more for him. You're not going to want to say, actually, Aaron, we don't really want you back. We're going to try to trade you. No, you saw Woody Johnson say it the day after the injury, talking about the story, tweeted something along the lines of the story is not over. They want him back. But in the short term, they want to find a way here to win games. And this is not to make excuses, Rich, for Hackett or for Zach Wilson or anything else. You'd be hard-pressed to find a lot of offenses that can operate with the offensive line in the state that the Jets' offensive line is right now. And it's not just the manpower. It's also the number of changes. I mean, they went into that game last weekend thinking up until Friday or Saturday, Dwayne Brown's going to play. Dwayne Brown ends up on IR. That's your left tackle. So you're constantly moving these pieces around. You're shuffling different things. It's causing a lot of consternation. And they went up against two of the best defenses in Zach Wilson's first 2 starts. Let's see what happens. Again, I come across, I think, sometimes the Zach Wilson apologist. I think that people narrowly focus on, just plug in any quarterback and it's going to get better. Maybe it won't. Zach Wilson was the number 2 overall pick for a reason. He's got the physical tools. He's got the work ethic. Obviously, there's a lot that he's got to learn about just being a quarterback in the NFL. But you're thinking we can wring more out of him than we can possibly get out of a Joe Flacco coming back. Maybe Joe Flacco gets you to 7 wins. But Zach Wilson, if he plays to his potential with everyone playing to their potential around him, you still got a shot, and that's the needle that they're trying to thread here.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. A couple more minutes left here. Davante Adams' comments, you want to interpret them for me about not having – he doesn't want to have the time – he doesn't have the time to I'm paraphrasing here, let things marinate to get some wins. He wants it now. What'd you make about all that as Josh McDaniels at 1-2 coming into this town to take on a hot Chargers team? What do you got for me on that?
Well, Davante Adams has won a lot of games going back to his days in Green Bay, and he signed up for something that's a little bit different right now when he went to Vegas. And there was more than one reason. It wasn't just Derek Carr. Adams had built a house out there. He wanted to live in Las Vegas. He had dreamed about being a Raider. That's where he wanted to be. But then, whatever it was, 15 games into last season, they punt on Derek Carr. They end up bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo. Adams caught a couple of touchdowns last week, so it's not as if he's not having productivity right now. But you can imagine the frustration when you're looking around and you are seeing, at least in terms of their frontline guys, we can talk about depth, but their frontline guys, they got superstars. You have Josh Jacobs. For some reason, you can't run the football. You have a Davante Adams. You're not passing it consistently. You got Max Crosby, who's doing his thing week in and week out, regardless of the circumstances, but he's not a one-man wrecking crew in terms of being able to fix everything else with your defense here. So I didn't read much more into it than Davante Adams didn't sign up to lose. He didn't think that he was going there, much less to play without Derek Carr, but he didn't think he was coming into a situation where there was a rebuild. He went there also in part, I believe, to show people that his career was not a product of Aaron Rodgers. And he wanted to prove I'm a Hall of Fame receiver, regardless of who's throwing me the football. When you're losing games, even if you're having production, that can certainly raise some questions. I get the frustration. I don't see a whole lot more in it than that. I would say, especially if the Chargers had lost last week, they had that thrilling win against Minnesota. But even now, this is, you don't want to call it an elimination game in week 4, but it kind of has that vibes of whoever wins this game is going to be feeling pretty good as they move forward here. Whoever loses this game, and Chargers have a week 5 bye, is going to be feeling like, okay, we are really looking upwards here at the rest of the AFC.
How about a hot seat game? Too early to start using those phrases or what, Tom?
I think there would have been a lot of discussion about it if the Chargers had lost last week. I don't think that that's necessarily realistic because they don't believe they've ever made a coaching change even in the season. With the Raiders, yeah, I mean, there's frustration. They were a playoff team in 2021. Josh came in. They started to make changes. It takes a while to enact that cultural shift. They went 7-10 last year, missed the playoffs, and now they're, I believe, 1-2 at this stage. So I think that the hot seat probably – the discussion certainly begins, especially when you've got these early season buys and teams naturally would be looking at those as, okay, is this the right time for us to make a change here? There's certainly some assistant coaches who you would anticipate would be on the hot seat, depending how things play out here in the coming weeks. I would tell you this, Rich, I'm going to wake up starting Monday with every single Monday morning with my antenna up because, this is where frustration boils over. This is where certain people go into CYA mode and just try to, okay, you want a warm body? We'll give you the coordinator. We'll give you this position coach. We'll make this change. We'll make this trade. That's the reality of the NFL. Even though it's the longer season than it's ever been, it's 17 games, even 4 games in, like I said at the start of this, you start to know, are we in or are we out? And if you're out, that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people.
All right. And as always, we end our conversation with you, Tom Pelissero. Open up your notebook. What have I not asked you about? What are you interested in talking about to leave us with, Tom? What do you got?
I'll give you this, Rich, because we got 4 teams right now that are 0-3, and they all happen to play each other this week. You got the Broncos going up against the Bears. You got the Panthers against the Vikings. I think that we've talked a lot about the Bears and the Broncos. There's a lot to unpack with those teams. I think that the other interesting game to me is the Panthers and Vikings, because I think that those 2 teams are probably more equipped to actually get out of this rut based on where they are personnel-wise. With Carolina, I'm just going to be looking for, can they just, what Bryce Young, assuming that he gets back on the field with that ankle, can they help him out? Can they help him out with the offensive line, with the play calls, with everything that goes into it? There's a lot of times where they're getting up to the line of scrimmage with 1 second on the play clock, and it looks like a fire drill. Just settle in. We know Bryce Young is an unbelievably smart, high processing individual. He's very instinctive. Just got to, make him feel like he can go out there and play. And then with the Vikings, all I see is debates still about trade Kirk Cousins and blow it up and what do you do? Vikings, I can tell you, are not in that mode right now. Maybe it's different, several weeks down the line, but when you look at these games that they've played so far, Rich, and I know I mentioned this on Game Day Morning last week, they are losing fumbles at a historic rate, not just fumbling at a historic rate, but losing fumbles at a historic rate, which, if you believe every analytical study ever done, fumble recovery is pure luck. Usually you're going to get back 50% of those over the course of the season. The Vikings have lost 6 in their first 2 games. That was the most in 20 years. They lost 1 or 2 again last week. If they can sort of smooth some of those things out, you still got Kirk Cousins, who's on record pace. You still got Justin Jefferson, who's on record pace. Jordan Addison's a really good young player. You have TJ Hawkinson. They can settle some things down, should get some help on the offensive line this week. Defensively, they're going to have to figure it out, but they're an offensive type of a football team. If they go in there and put some points up on Carolina, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're able to kind of jumpstart this thing. And we're talking about, can the Vikings make a playoff run as opposed to when do the Vikings start trading away all their players? Always make us smarter, Tom. Thanks very much. Have a good NFL Insiders program, and we'll see you next week and on Game Day Morning beforehand. Thanks, brother. Sounds great, Rich. Thanks. At Tom Pelissero on social media, a must follow right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.